So this is the second part two, or maybe part 3, because I feel I need to return back to this. So the first video, and then there's the two breakoffs. Right? The first one's talking about, as you know, you've already seen it. Is talking about what philosophers sometimes call qualia, and I don't particularly like that term for what's describing. I'm kind of trying to describe more or talk about that, plus the other things that might not encompass. That term might not encompass. But at least when people have a class in philosophy, right? We have a starting point, or if they're familiar, if they've read philosophical treatises or papers by different people, or books. Now, when I'm not going to go through this. You don't need a class in. Well, I don't even need to mention it. As I said before, like these things that we're talking about come from a place that's, I mean, it's said to be in us in general speaking term, but spatially non-available. I mean, even for the materialist, it would show up as electrical impulses on the brain, which you could kind of observe through an MRI, but then again, that's a representation of what your brain looks like during these things. You can't do some, again, I think this is from The Simpsons, that we're trying to quote something else, like a Jedi mind meld or some weird thing like that. It's not like you could, tilt your head over to somebody else's, or by looking at this picture, you would then get mental image picturing and all the feeling and sentiment and what that connects to in the person's past and what it means to them and everything in your mind. You can't see basically through their eyes, and you can't be in their shoes, right? 100%, right? Maybe you can experience some of the same things, but of what they actually experience, there's a block there, and there always will be. Daniel Dennett, I'd read something that he had written, and I'm thinking he finally kind of says, well, alien races might be able to talk to. Totally useless. Totally useless. They're bringing up an alien race, saying, well, they might be able to communicate. Yeah, we're talking about people here. We're not talking about. I thought that was kind of a thing that was almost an affirmation of quality. But going on further, in the philosophy class I took in college, the teacher pointed to a clock on the wall and said, would Aboriginal Australians see that clock? And I said, yes. He said, no, they wouldn't. He said, no, I'm talking about the wall, that clock, the numbers, and the hands. Would they see the hands on the clock, the numbers, and that? And I said, yes. And they said, no, the round clock separate from the wall, that these shapes, they wouldn't know what the shapes mean, but they'd still see them. And he kept shaking his head and kind of laughing. Some of the other people were too, of like, no, like the majority. And I'm thinking, what the heck is going on here? I mean, this goes beyond, me thinking, in 5th grade or 4th grade or whatever it was, about color. Well, if I'm always calling this color that color and that color this color, then we can't, we don't. There's no way of we're saying the same thing, but we're perceiving it totally differently. And I didn't realize how drastic that was until college, and it gets in these things that some cultures don't see the color spectrum that we see. They observe warm colors and cold colors. There's two colors, not the two basic colors, not the Roy G. Biv, the basic Roy G. Biv that we see. More like Roy G. Biv. I think he wanted to kind of get a guy's name instead of indigo and violet. Aren't those the same? Maybe I'm seeing one less colored than somebody else, but I think indigo and violet is too similar. or that it's just a transition between blue and purple. But they don't see the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple thing that we see, right? They see warm and cold, and you'd be surprised at what they consider warm colors and cold colors. They might not, it's probably not what you would suspect as warm and cold. And people say, well, no, they actually see the colors, the various colors, but they don't. They just call them in two groupings. Common half-assed rationalization, right? It's not. Somebody might say that, but then you'd be like, wow, there's a certain form of and I don't mean this in any racial way, ethnocentric. I mean it in our cultural context versus theirs. It is. It's saying, well, no, they really don't. Yeah, they do. They see two colors. There's a people in the rainforests that it's very odd. And this is something that I can't even wrap my mind around. Not that I can totally wrap my mind around seeing two colors. Although I know it's not just, oh, they're just calling it two different things. They actually know between green and blue and orange and yellow and red. They don't. But what's even stranger is there's people who lived in the rainforest, the jungles. I believe it was South America. I believe it was in the Amazon. It could have been Central Africa or South Asia, or one of the islands. I believe though it was in the Amazon, and they saw that green and clear was the same to them. Now I know, right? What? Clear and green. Green was not a color. Green was clear. Again, the majority of what they saw we would call green. And it's to the point where they would point to things like water and glass, and then something that we would describe as green, and they'd say it's the same. And even when they went through, can you see through these things? And but you can see your hand on the other. They responded completely as if, no, that's clear. They could identify other colors, right? They might have been on. I don't think they were on the warm, cold color system, right? But it was actually they recognized these other colors, and they had words for them, but green and clear were the same word. And there seemed to be the anthropologists were getting they were really strained by this, and they were fascinated because green and how? But even the objects, if somebody from 4,000 years ago and an Aboriginal from 4,000 years ago, why do I keep using that? It's what he used, and not to mention that's a country that had been isolated from the other countries and had remained kind of in this time capsule at this, in at least in technological development and philosophical development. But not to say that people didn't develop in their culture, gradually changed and everything. I'm not saying that, dude. Totally. But they had been separated from the Europe, Africa, Asia, that continent. It's really not one continent. It's really not three continents. It's just you have the Mediterranean connecting everything. So you separated, and then 4,000 years ago, where we know there's not trade or anything, so they're right there. They wouldn't. The bookshelf that I'm looking at right now, it has books on it, and there's that coffee mug, and there's that skull thing that my sister got me, and that candle, and that miniature coffin, and the hookah, and all those books and bookshelf books. They wouldn't. Seeing that, even as that, separate from the wall and the floor, wouldn't be seen. And I want to stress this, it's not description. I'm not speaking of description, I'm speaking of actual going into this. Now, how do they perceive it? We can't get down to that, right? I mean, there can be descriptions, but we can't really place ourselves in the shoes of that person. So when you get to things like, and as I said, there can be same culture not being able to convey. This is why when I was talking to Big Lundy, and he says, well, I just, I was saying, but why don't you, we were kind of going on the idea of morality and ethics between the atheist and theist, and he says, well, I just believe that. And I said, all right, fine, that's totally cool. And then he said, no, wait, and then we started to talk more, and my computer wound up dying, and I'd send a message, we'll talk some other time. But I accept that. I don't use that as, oh, see, they just believe this. No, that's a good thing. There's the idea, oh, you need proof of something, or you need consensus from other people. If you get abducted by a UFO, right? All the people in the world can tell you, oh, that was a hallucination, you really didn't experience that. But you would, I mean, are you a sheep, such a sheep to say, yes, my actual experience that I experienced that nobody else did wasn't real in space and time, and probably was maybe real for me, but actually these events didn't happen. Say, hell no, that happened, and everybody's going to think I'm crazy, but that actually happened, I don't care. Kind of like the analogy of, the cave of, which was Plato, Socrates, Aristotle. I get those jumbled up with, my gosh, more so than the early writers of the 1st, 2nd century and 3rd century. I get the Plato, Aristotle, not their overarching ideas, but the analogies, because you could see them being used at different things. I think it was Plato, because of the implications that the analogy of the cave has. To that guy, when he saw all the actual forms of things, and yeah, this is very Platonic, the true form of something, and goes into the cave and talks to people who are observing the shadows, they get very angry at him even. So there is a disconnect, right? And for people who say that there's not, that we can communicate things, or that they would look for patterns, or that they would see that something was there, or observe something being different, I would say take philosophy classes. I don't know what to say to that. This is why I don't expect people to, even when I'm talking, in many things, yes, but for them not to do. I understand if people would say, and I've never gotten this yet, I think people are smarter than this and know a substantial amount of philosophy, that they don't say, oh, well, you are just talking, because I speak against the sky god, basically the demiurge. You're just talking about the sky god, but you're trying to subtract things from it. You're just saying, well, no, I don't believe in that sky god, but you essentially do. But I think people have had enough contact with Eastern mysticism and Eastern philosophy and religions, that things like the Tao and Buddhist ideas and stuff like that can be seen, and then they're not seen as the sky god. So they're the existing one is not equatable to the God of the Protestants or Catholics or the West. To the point where I can't even say that I believe in a God, right? Because the gods were the daemons, right? The spirits, the divisions, the archons. And we have to reject that. And the word theos is used, but it's always qualified, right? Just like nous or logos or Sophia, in a very particular way, and we see this through literature. So there is going to be a breakdown of communication at a very fundamental level. I mean, that's where it does happen. And I might go on to another one after this. Peace to you.